This October 1st and 2nd, slightly over 400 people gathered at Nazarene Theological Seminary in Kansas City to celebrate Preaching in a Pluralistic Society Preaching Conference. 8 preachers had been invited, 4 preached each day. The basic format was that we gathered and for each session, and the beginning announcements were made. Actually, a bobblehead was given away by Grace and Peace magazine.
Being here at the Preaching Conference the last day and a half has challenged me in my preaching. There are times where I feel very overwhelmed, with all the responsibilities of being a pastor.
Well, I was really looking forward to hearing different styles of preaching, but I took away a whole lot more than that.
Dr. David Busick, the preacher, and then one of the 8 preachers sat and discussed among themselves how the person had developed the sermon. They entered into conversation about preaching methods, about the formation of preaching character, about the relationship of their identity and their context to their preaching, those kinds of questions. Microphones were opened up for questions from the participants, the people who attended, and for about 15 minutes questions were asked. People were conversing with each other. There was ongoing conversations in the hallways during the breaks. Several of the lunch periods had special interest groups, church planting, naval chaplains, students, women in ministry, and how the preaching task impacted those kinds of groups in particular.
The techniques that these different preachers have used in forming the messages, but also how they let God's Word just ruminate in them throughout the week and they live it out, and that's how these sermons are prepared. It's not just kind of a technical thing where they sit down and write it and then they're done, but it really is part of their lives.
We shared with Dr. Molly Marshall, the president of Central Baptist Theological Seminary, in a banquet, and she shared her concern that there seemed to be fewer young people responding to a call to preach or interpreting their call to ministry as a call to preach, and gave us thought-provoking ideas of how we might be a part of changing the way preaching is perceived among young people.
As a student, it's very enriching to sit down and sit at the feet of these preachers and hearing their wisdom, their insight, being able to break down their messages, how they do, why they do certain things in their preaching styles. It's great to hear different preaching styles, different methods, different presentations.
Just seeing the difference in style between Tim Green and Gabriel Seguero, 2 completely opposite preachers, completely different styles, same denomination, same purpose and same goal. And so that's been really cool, seeing that you don't have to fit a specific mold to be in this profession.
The sense at the end of this conference is that it was a marvelous experience. It was inspiring in terms of the preaching that was heard, but it was also instructive and practical in terms of the conversations that were had with the preacher about how they did what they did, so that persons who were younger preachers or who had only learned one preaching style were exposed to both a wide variety of preaching styles, but also the thought processes that go into the preaching styles or into different preaching contexts. Some of the preachers preach pastorally to the same congregation over and over. Others are now itinerating from place to place and preaching almost always to a different congregation each time they preach. All of those factors came together. There was a tremendous sense of God's presence in the conference, and that this was a marvelously helpful thing for the life of the church. And we are grateful that God allowed us to participate in that.